What have we learned in the last 1 year? What has India learned about both power and vulnerability? And how is it shaping Indian foreign policy today?
Look, I think a year ago, certainly a few months ago, it was very clear that the world was moving towards much greater unpredictability, volatility, uncertainty. Use whichever word you prefer. And here's the problem. When you predict something like that, people say, okay, so you predict what that means. Now, by very definition of unpredictability, you don't know what you're heading towards. It's not an extrapolation of what has been there in the past. I mean, clearly it's disruptive. But again, the human mind, like, for example, people felt in unpredictability that it'll be a variant, for example, of somebody's second, first term would be different, first term, and then what happens. But what we are seeing is terms are different, times are different, a few months make a difference, a few weeks make a difference, a few tweets make a difference. So actually, it's really quite a, I would say, an experience for the world to go through this level of policy changes, of practical impact of that. And also the fact that so much of it is done so publicly, that it's played out in the full glare of the spotlight. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, if you look, I'm talking the last 3-4 years, we began out by worrying about our supply chains and our sources of production, and said, okay, when we said, let's de-risk the world, let us hedge against uncertainty, that meant having more production centers, having more supply chains, more resilient, more redundant supply chains. But now we also have to protect ourselves against the uncertainty of market access. So, you worry about over-dependence on markets, just as you worried on over-dependence on suppliers or over-dependence on connectivity. So you could say, in a sense, almost the entire economic chain has become far more riskier or far more difficult really to assume in many ways. So I would say today the central proposition probably in diplomacy, in international relations is how do you de-risk, how do you hedge, how do you become more resilient, how do you safeguard yourself against unforeseen contingencies, which again I emphasize by definition are unforeseen, and really sort of build policy and build in a sense plans around that, and that's a very big challenge for the entire world.
And since, and I'm going to turn to the secretary from Mexico, but before, just as a lead-in question to the question to you, I saw on Twitter that you had met a group of Global South countries recently, yesterday in fact, and
today.
And you've been discussing, of course, the imperatives and collaborative methods on the days ahead. We talk about the South-South agenda, India, Mexico, Brazil, and other large economies in the global South. They talk about working together, partnering together, finding solutions together. Can you scale up to substitute for the missing North in many of these projects?
I'm not sure, Samir, that I would accept that binary. By the way, among the people I met were all my European counterparts as well. So I think it's too simplistic to put North in a basket and South in a basket. And there are some countries which fit neither. So it's a much more complicated, much more nuanced world. I think many of the concerns, for example, which I articulated are also concerns which are shared in Europe. I mean, I certainly heard that from my European colleagues. So what is happening, that's why I would in a way, say the model, we've had an accelerated move into a multipolar world. Okay, a multipolar world where actually the most important poles of the world are today driving multipolarity, not diluting it. You know, so many of these concerns, the search for new partners, more partners, bigger partners, more business, more options. It's not something which is a global South concern alone or an Indian concern alone. I think different parts of the world share it. I certainly heard it in Europe. Their interest today in moving forward with India was very palpable, and by the way, is very reciprocated by us. But it also applies, as you say, to the global South. I think a large part of our discussions are that there are many things we can do between ourselves. Maybe we have not explored that as seriously and efficiently as we should. And we could be looking at it. In fact, this is exactly what the minister and I were discussing before this panel started, between India and Mexico. So I can imagine, look, globalization won't stop. Doing business with each other won't stop. It's just different lines of different intensity and different values will now get re-engineered because of these changes. And it's that re-engineering process that we are actually going to see over a period of time. Let me pick up what do you do in this very turbulent atmosphere? I think particularly for large countries, it is important to build capacities, to be more self-reliant. That is very much the focus today in India. And because you said, look at it from a perspective of technology, I think in many ways, Mr. Krishnan speaking before us gave some of the answers. And we speak of multipolarity as though it's something that will happen. You have to build multipolarity. And you build multipolarity by building national capacities. And when you build national capacities and have national experiences, some of it is transposable to other people who may relate to it. So, for example, if you take DPI, digital public infrastructure, there are many other societies who find the Indian model of DPI, frankly, far more absorbable and relevant and transposable than a European model or a American model of how to run a more digital life. Now, it can be big things, it can be little things. What we have seen, because you spoke again earlier about South-South cooperation, many things we've done in India. If you have something like a drinking water mission, or you have taking electricity to every home, each one of these efforts actually has scaled up capacities in India, has created businesses and companies and people in India who can take those capabilities abroad and today actually drive South-South cooperation. So you have a country like India still at $3,000 per capita income, which actually has assistance programs in almost 80 countries in the world. And in some cases, these are billion-dollar programs where, what we have done in India, we have taken out of India to some other country. So to me, technology, self-reliance, multipolarity, South-South cooperation, they're part of one basket, and that is part of the response to what is happening, the point number one. Point number two, which we haven't spoken about today, this world which we are talking about will require a global workforce. Where that global workforce is to be housed and located may be a matter of a political debate. But there's no getting away. If you look at demand and you look at demographics, demands cannot be met in many countries purely out of national demographics. This is a reality. You cannot run away from this reality. So how do we create a more acceptable, contemporary, efficient model of a global workforce which is then located in a distributed global workplace? I think this is a very big question today which the international economy has to address. The third point, and I would like to pick up on your optimism here, if you actually look at it, for all the imponderables, the uncertainties, eventually trade does find a way. And the fact is, it is easier to trade today. It is easier for physical reasons. There are better roads, better shipping, etc. It's easier for digital reasons. There are much smoother trade interfaces than there have ever been in human existence. So for all the obstacles and complications that may arise, I also think they will be countered in some ways or mitigated in some ways by what will happen, I think, in the trade domain. And finally, I agree with him. I think we will see, as part of this re-engineered world, I think we will see new, more different trade arrangements between countries, countries which will make decisions which they may not have made in other circumstances, countries which today will feel the desire, sometimes even the compulsion, to have new partners and new regions will look very much more. And certainly I can tell you where India is concerned, in many other regions, and that's one of the points we were discussing today, Latin America, Caribbean, where we actually do roughly about $45 billion of trade every year. But I can see with much greater effort even what may be considered very distant regions today becoming much more relevant. So we are going to, technology-wise, trade-wise, connectivity-wise, workplace-wise, end up in a very different world in a very short time.